Lucy was breathing fast, feeling the cold wind hit her face as she ran through the cemetery. Her legs ached, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the weight on her chest. She was late, as always, but this time, the delay had a cost she knew was irreparable. The people were already gathered, their faces covered with tears, murmuring words of comfort as the priest performed the final rites. Catherine, her older sister, was dead. For months, Lucy had avoided calls, emails, and messages. Always too busy, always with ready excuses for not attending family gatherings or responding to Catherine's attempts at reconciliation. They had drifted apart due to different life choices, but the truth was that Lucy felt intimidated by the success and the perfect life Catherine seemed to have. She was the dedicated wife, the ideal sister, and Lucy was the opposite. Free, irresponsible, but lonely. Now, all of that seemed insignificant. The wrong choices, the years apart. The weight of regret crushed Lucy, making each step toward the grave a burden. Catherine was no longer here to forgive her, and the pain of that reality was suffocating. When Lucy finally reached the burial site, the reproachful looks from friends and family hit her like a wave. They didn't need to say anything, the accusation was clear in their eyes. She arrived late to her own sister's funeral. The guilt was already burning in her mind, but now the disdain from others only amplified the feeling of failure. The priest was about to finish the sermon, and Catherine's coffin was just minutes away from being sealed. Desperate, Lucy felt an impulse she didn't even understand. Her heart screamed for one last chance to say goodbye, to at least see her sister one more time. "Please, wait!" Lucy shouted, rushing toward the coffin. "I need to see her. I need to say goodbye to my sister." The request was met with heavy silence. Most of those present were emotionally drained and visibly disturbed by the sudden interruption. Michael, Catherine's husband, looked at Lucy for a moment, his face expressionless. After a few seconds of hesitation, he made a brief gesture, allowing the coffin to be opened. As the coffin was slowly lifted, Lucy approached. Her eyes burned, and the lump in her throat was impossible to swallow. Leaning over the coffin, she saw Catherine's face, pale and still, like a porcelain doll. It was hard to believe that her sister, so full of life, now lay there, so distant and cold. For a moment, Lucy was paralyzed. How had she allowed things to get to this point? Why had she let the distance between them grow? Lucy extended her trembling hand, gently touching Catherine's cold hand. "I'm sorry," Lucy murmured, her voice broken by sobs. "I should have been here. I failed you." But then, something impossible happened. Catherine's eyes opened. At first, Lucy thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Catherine was dead, there was no way. But her eyes moved, her eyelids fluttered, and suddenly her entire body made a slight movement. Gasps of shock spread through the cemetery. Some people ran back, others were paralyzed with terror. Lucy, caught in a mix of horror and disbelief, stepped back, not knowing what to do. Her sister, who was supposed to be dead, was now slowly waking up in the coffin. "Catherine," Lucy whispered, her hands trembling as her sister's eyes finally focused on her, with difficulty. "Lucy." Catherine's voice was weak, barely audible, but she had just spoken. She was alive. Michael, Catherine's husband, ran toward the coffin, dramatically kneeling beside his wife. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked to the sky, as if witnessing a miracle. "She's alive. It's a miracle," he shouted, arms raised as if thanking the heavens. "God brought my wife back." But Lucy stood still. She still couldn't process what was happening. How was this possible? Catherine was dead, wasn't she? She looked around, trying to find some clue in the shocked faces of others that could make sense of this. But all she saw were expressions of panic and disbelief. The sound of sirens in the distance finally broke the silence, and soon paramedics arrived, rushing to place Catherine on a stretcher and take her to the hospital. Lucy watched everything from a distance, unable to move, while Michael remained by Catherine's side, holding her hand like the devoted husband. However, there was something in Michael's eyes that made Lucy feel a chill down her spine. Something about his reaction seemed fake. The hospital was immersed in silence, except for the sound of machines monitoring heartbeats and breathing. Lucy felt the weight of that silence as she walked through the white, sterile corridors toward the waiting room. Her body was in shock. She still couldn't believe what she had witnessed. Catherine, her sister, who had been declared dead, was now alive. But how was that possible? She sat in one of the hard plastic chairs and crossed her arms, trying to control the trembling in her hands. Fear and guilt mixed inside her, creating an emotional turmoil that was hard to describe. She wanted to feel relieved, but at the same time, there was something deeper that disturbed her. The way everything had happened, and especially Michael's behavior, made her uneasy. Michael, always so controlled, was acting too dramatic. His tears at the cemetery and the way he proclaimed a miracle seemed exaggerated. Almost as if he were performing. Since when did he display such emotion publicly? As Lucy reflected, the sound of footsteps approached, and she saw Michael entering the waiting room. He looked exhausted, but at the same time, there was something in his posture that didn't match the situation. He was holding a cup of coffee in his hand, and when he saw her, he gave her a forced smile. "Lucy, you won't believe the miracle we witnessed today," he said, sitting down beside her. "Catherine is a strong woman. I knew she wouldn't leave us so soon." Michael spoke with total confidence that Catherine would make a full recovery. But something about the way he pronounced every word sounded false, almost rehearsed. Lucy didn't know what to think, but her instincts screamed that something was very wrong. "I'm so relieved," Michael continued, with dramatic emphasis that made Lucy recoil. "Just thinking that I could have lost her. What would I do without my Catherine?" Lucy simply nodded. Her gaze wandered around the room, unable to focus on Michael. Deep down, she knew Catherine's relationship with Michael wasn't perfect. In recent months, Catherine had mentioned some difficulties in their marriage, but nothing that seemed serious enough to lead to such a tragedy. Or perhaps it was. Suddenly, one of the doctors appeared at the door, calling for them. Michael jumped up quickly, almost with enthusiasm, and walked toward the doctor. Lucy followed closely behind. "How is she?" Michael asked eagerly. "She's going to be okay, right?" The doctor seemed to hesitate, looking at them both before speaking. "Catherine is stable, but we're still trying to understand what happened to her." The test results were a bit confusing. Lucy frowned, feeling the tension rise in the air. Confusing test results? What did that mean? "What's wrong with the tests?" she asked, trying to stay calm. The doctor scratched his head, looking at the chart in his hands. "We detected extremely high levels of insulin in her body. It's unusual, especially since Catherine isn't diabetic. This is causing instability in her blood sugar levels, which may have been the cause of the collapse that led to the declaration of death. But we're investigating why her insulin levels are so high. It could have been a medical error, or something else." "Something else?" Lucy felt her heart race. What exactly did that mean? "Well, excessive insulin can be administered intentionally," the doctor said, looking at the two of them cautiously. "In some cases of poisoning, insulin is used as a method to induce system collapse. I'm not saying that's what happened, but it's a possibility we can't rule out yet." Lucy was in shock. Poisoning? Was that what the doctor was suggesting? Michael, however, stepped forward, forcing a bitter smile. "Doctor, that's absurd. My wife couldn't have been poisoned. She was sick, yes, but a medical error is much more likely. Maybe the medications she was taking," he shrugged, with an air of indifference. Lucy glanced at him. "Medications? What medications?" But the doctor continued. "We're investigating all possibilities. Catherine is still under observation, and we hope to have more answers soon. In the meantime, we'll continue to monitor her insulin levels and other signs." Michael thanked the doctor and turned to Lucy, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry. This is just a misunderstanding. Catherine will be back soon, safe and sound. Let's go home and rest, okay?" Lucy tried to smile back, but the unease in her chest only grew. What was Michael hiding? She knew something wasn't right, and no matter how much he tried to hide it, Michael was lying. The following days were an emotional whirlwind for Lucy. Catherine remained under observation, still weak but slowly recovering. The hospital ran new tests daily, and the medical team was still puzzled by how Catherine had ended up in such a state. The high insulin levels remained a mystery to the doctors, but Lucy was beginning to form her own theory. Michael, as always, was by Catherine's side, perfectly playing the role of the devoted husband. He brought flowers, spoke calmly with the doctors, always with a forced smile and a kind word. He was there all the time, trying to control the narrative. To everyone else, he seemed the perfect partner, always watching over his wife's recovery. But Lucy couldn't shake the unease in her chest. Something was off, and the longer time passed, the more her suspicions about Michael grew. The way he insisted everything was fine, that there was no need for concern, only increased her distrust. One afternoon, while Lucy was in the hospital cafeteria, she overheard a conversation that made her alert. Two nurses, at a nearby table, were talking about Catherine's case. "I heard the doctors are still baffled by her case," one of them whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Yeah, they're saying it could have been poisoning. Her insulin levels were through the roof. And she's not even diabetic." Lucy tightened her grip on her coffee cup. Poisoning. The word echoed in her mind since the doctor had mentioned the possibility. But if that was the case, who could have tried to kill her sister? Michael? It was hard to imagine. Lucy had never fully trusted Michael, but murder? Could he be capable of something so extreme? Back in Catherine's room, Michael was again by his wife's side, holding her hand while whispering sweet words. He seemed so composed. There were no signs of anxiety in his eyes, just a disturbing calm. When he saw Lucy enter the room, he stood up, adjusting his suit with a tired smile. "Lucy, I'm going home for a while. I need to rest. Stay here with Catherine. She'll love having you around." She nodded, watching as he grabbed his things and left. Something about his behavior was off, but Lucy still didn't have proof. As soon as Michael was gone, Lucy sat beside Catherine's bed. Catherine was weak but awake. Her eyes slowly opened, focusing on her sister for a moment. "Lucy," her voice was a weak whisper. I feel so strange." Lucy held Catherine's hand, trying to keep her tone calm. "You're going to be okay. You're safe now." Catherine took a deep breath, her voice almost inaudible. "I don't remember what happened. I only remember feeling very weak, like I was fainting." Lucy's heart tightened. She didn't want to pressure Catherine, but she needed answers. "Did you notice anything strange before everything happened? Anything that made you feel sick?" Catherine shook her head slowly, her eyes confused. "I don't know. Michael, he gave me some medications. He said they were to help me relax, that it was just a phase of stress." The mention of Michael made Lucy's body stiffen. Medications? That didn't seem right. "What kind of medications, Catherine?" Catherine closed her eyes, visibly tired. "I don't remember. Just, Michael said it would help. He always takes care of me." Lucy's discomfort only grew. Was Michael administering unprescribed medications? As she left the hospital that night, Lucy decided it was time to act. She couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. She needed to investigate. Something inside her screamed that Michael was involved somehow. She remembered how Catherine mentioned their marriage had been going through difficulties, but she never knew the details. Now, it all seemed connected. Lucy spent the following nights sleepless, researching insulin poisoning. She spoke with doctors and specialists, trying to understand how this could have happened. More and more, the pieces began to fit together. Someone had been administering small, constant doses of insulin to Catherine, causing slow collapses and leading to her near-fatal state. But who had access to insulin? How could someone obtain it without being detected? That's when Lucy discovered something disturbing. Michael was involved in suspicious transactions, buying medications without prescriptions, something he managed through contacts at private clinics. That's how he got the insulin. And the most terrifying part, it was all planned. The truth finally hit. Michael was poisoning Catherine. He was slowly killing her, hoping her death would appear as a sudden collapse caused by stress or illness. But why would he do that? Money? It could be. Catherine was the heir to a large fortune, and with her death, Michael would inherit everything. Now, Lucy knew the truth. But how could she prove it? The following days were a race against time. Lucy knew she had to act fast, but she couldn't let Michael suspect her intentions. Catherine's husband was skilled at manipulating situations, and if he sensed that Lucy was onto something, he might change his plans, or worse, try something even more drastic to finalize his scheme. Lucy spent her days by Catherine's side, watching every detail, paying attention to every word that came out of Michael's mouth. He continued to play the part of the worried husband, always beside his wife with a reassuring smile and encouraging words. But now, Lucy saw the shadows behind his perfect behavior. Every gesture seemed rehearsed, every word calculated to keep him above suspicion. But Michael was starting to get suspicious. Lucy could feel it. The way he looked at her, as if studying her, trying to figure out if she knew something. She had to be careful, or she could put Catherine's life in even greater danger. During a routine hospital visit, Lucy decided to do something bold. While Michael was out on a break, she quickly approached the reception desk and asked to speak with Catherine's doctor. The doctor, who already knew Lucy from her daily visits, led her to a private room. "Doctor, I need to know more about the insulin. It's been worrying me for days," Lucy said, trying to stay calm. The doctor nodded, looking at Catherine's chart. "Her insulin levels are still unstable, but we're trying to balance them. The strangest part is that we can't identify the source of the excess. She has no history of diabetes or any condition that would justify such high levels." Lucy took a deep breath, preparing for what she was about to ask. What if this isn't natural? What if someone is intentionally administering insulin? The doctor paused for a moment, clearly surprised by the suggestion. He adjusted his glasses, looking directly at Lucy. "Are you suggesting your sister was poisoned?" Lucy nodded. She knew it sounded extreme, but she was certain Michael was behind it. "Yes. And I think her husband, Michael, is involved. He had access to medications, and from what I've discovered, he bought insulin without a prescription through contacts at private clinics." The doctor seemed skeptical, but also intrigued. He flipped through the test results again, seeming to connect some dots. "It's a possibility. If what you're saying is true, it could explain her collapses. We'll need more evidence to confirm this, but I promise I'll investigate this possibility more seriously." Lucy felt relieved, but she knew it wasn't enough yet. She needed concrete proof to incriminate Michael. And the only way to get that was to find records of the insulin purchases and any other suspicious transactions he had made. That night, back at Catherine and Michael's house, Lucy took advantage of a rare opportunity. Michael had gone out to take care of work matters, or at least that's what he said. Lucy knew this was the perfect moment to look for anything that could expose him. Lucy's heart raced as she moved quietly through the house. Every noise, every shadow seemed to heighten her anxiety, but she knew she had to be quick. Any mistake, and Michael could return sooner than expected. She went to Michael's office, a place that was always obsessively organized. The desk was immaculate, and the documents were kept in order, but Lucy knew that the darkest secrets often hide in the most ordinary things. She began searching through drawers, looking for something out of place, something that could prove her theory. After several minutes of searching without success, Lucy began to feel desperation rise. What if she was wrong? What if there was nothing there? But then, in a locked drawer at the bottom of the desk, Lucy found something. Using a spare key that Catherine had mentioned months ago, Lucy managed to open the drawer, and inside, she found a thick envelope. When she opened it, her suspicions were confirmed. There were receipts for the purchase of medications, including large quantities of insulin. All the transactions had been made at private clinics, without formal prescriptions. Michael had been careful, but not careful enough. He had left a trail, and now Lucy had what she needed. Michael was killing Catherine. He was poisoning her slowly, waiting for her death to appear as a natural collapse, perhaps caused by stress or extreme exhaustion. But now, with the documents in hand, Lucy had the proof she needed to expose him. The sound of a door opening echoed through the house, and Lucy felt a chill down her spine. Michael was back. She quickly hid the documents and tried to appear calm as she left the office. When she reached the living room, Michael was standing there, looking at her with a questioning gaze. "Lucy, what are you doing here so late?" His tone was soft, but Lucy could feel the danger behind his words. He was suspicious. "I was just trying to distract myself. I need to keep my mind occupied while Catherine is in the hospital," Lucy responded, trying to sound natural, but she knew Michael wasn't easy to fool. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made Lucy feel in danger. "Well, I hope you found something interesting," Michael said, with a disturbingly calm tone. "Catherine will be fine soon. There's no need to worry so much." Lucy swallowed hard, knowing she now had the proof she needed but was still far from being safe. Lucy was sweating cold. The documents she had just found proved that Michael was poisoning Catherine, but now he was home, just a few feet from where she had hidden them. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as she tried to control her breathing and appear as normal as possible. The calculated smile on Michael's face no longer fooled Lucy. She knew he was suspicious. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Michael asked, his voice low and dangerous. Lucy played it off, trying to keep her tone casual. "I was just organizing some things. Being here alone helps me think." She forced a smile, though fear was eating away at her inside. Michael slowly approached her, his eyes locked on hers. He was evaluating her every move, every expression. "You're nervous, Lucy. Something is bothering you," he said, stopping in front of her, tilting his head slightly. "Can I help with something?" Lucy swallowed hard. She knew that if she let anything slip, she would be in serious danger. The man in front of her had already tried to kill Catherine, and there was no reason to believe he wouldn't do the same to her if he discovered what she knew. "I'm just tired. This whole situation with Catherine, it's left me emotionally drained," Lucy replied, trying to sound convincing. Michael studied her for a few more seconds, the silence between them becoming suffocating. Then, he gave a small smile, but his eyes were cold. "I understand. Well, why don't you rest a bit? I can take care of whatever's needed. After all, Catherine is my wife. I take care of her." The words came out smoothly, but they were loaded with a dark undertone. Lucy knew that this was a warning. Michael was in control, and he would do anything to maintain appearances. She would have to act fast. Now that she had the evidence, she needed to hand it over to the authorities before Michael had the chance to do something worse. But first, she had to get out of there. "Yes, you're right. I'll rest for a bit," she said, trying to end the conversation. Michael nodded, still with the calculated smile on his lips, but Lucy could feel the tension growing in the air. Every move she made was being watched, every word analyzed. She left the room and went to the guest bedroom, where she had been staying while Catherine was in the hospital. As soon as she closed the door, her heart raced. She was terrified, but she knew she had to stay calm. She picked up her phone, and with trembling hands, began dialing the police. But before she could complete the call, Michael suddenly opened the door. Lucy froze. "You know, Lucy, I've been thinking," he began, casually, as if nothing were wrong. "You've been so involved in everything lately. Almost as if you're looking for something." He walked over to the bed where she was sitting, looking at the phone in her hand. His eyes gleamed with cold malice. "I think you found something you weren't supposed to." Lucy felt her heart stop for a moment. He knew. Michael approached, leaning over her. The smell of his heavy cologne and the intensity of his gaze made Lucy's panic grow. "What do you think you know, Lucy?" She looked directly at him, knowing there was no way to avoid it anymore. It was time to face the truth. "I know what you did to Catherine." Lucy's voice was low but firm. "You poisoned her." Michael let out a short, humorless laugh. He stepped back a few paces, reflecting on the accusation. "Poisoned," he repeated, sarcastically. "What an absurd idea. Why would I do something like that to my own wife?" "You wanted the inheritance." Lucy stood up, facing him. "And you knew that if Catherine died suddenly, no one would suspect anything. You administered insulin to her, slowly, to make it look like a natural collapse. But you didn't count on her surviving." Michael's face changed. The charm vanished, and in its place appeared a cold, calculated expression. "Do you really think you can accuse me of this without proof?" He stepped closer again, the danger evident in his stance. "Catherine will never believe you. I'm her husband. I take care of her. You're just a distant sister, someone who showed up when it was already too late. And now, you're here, trying to sabotage everything." Lucy took a step back but held her ground. "I have the proof, Michael," she declared, holding up the envelope she had found. "Receipts for insulin purchases, made by you, at private clinics. You left a trail." Michael's gaze hardened, his facade completely crumbling. He took a step toward her, fury growing in his eyes. "You're not leaving this house with those documents." Lucy knew she was in real danger now. Michael was willing to do anything to get rid of her. She needed to get out of there, and fast. Without hesitation, Lucy turned and ran for the door, but Michael was faster. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her back with force. The envelope fell to the floor, scattering the documents everywhere. "You're not going to ruin my plans," Michael shouted, his eyes filled with hatred. Lucy struggled to free herself, panic taking over. She needed to escape. The struggle between the two was chaotic. Lucy managed to land a blow on Michael, pushing him away long enough to grab the envelope. Without looking back, she ran down the hallway, rushing down the stairs, hearing Michael's furious footsteps behind her. She ran out the front door, racing toward the street. Her heart was pounding, and she could barely breathe. Michael was right behind her, shouting threats, but Lucy didn't stop. She knew that if she did, it would be the end. Then, like a miracle, a police car turned the corner. Lucy waved desperately, and the officers stopped immediately. "Please, help me," she cried, gasping for breath, as the documents fell from her hands. "He tried to kill my sister. He poisoned her." The police quickly surrounded her and arrested Michael, who was still panting, trying to regain his composure. He knew he had lost. Lucy, now safe, handed over the evidence to the authorities. The truth would finally come out, and Michael would pay for everything he had done. The days following Michael's arrest were a blur of emotions for Lucy and Catherine. The truth about the poisoning and Michael's cold plan was revealed to the public, shocking not only the family but also close friends and acquaintances of the couple. The story of the man who tried to slowly kill his own wife, using insulin to mask the crime, had spread everywhere, bringing a mix of horror and sympathy for Catherine, who was now trying to recover both physically and emotionally. Lucy still remembered the final scene, when Michael, handcuffed, was taken away by the police. The face of her brother-in-law, once so controlled, was now marked by defeat and frustration. But behind that cruel man, Lucy knew the scars he left on her sister would be hard to heal. Catherine had survived, but the emotional trauma and deep betrayal she had suffered would take time to heal. However, in that moment, there was one thing Lucy knew for sure: she would never leave Catherine alone again. The two had been separated by choices and past hurts, but now, they had a chance to rebuild what had been lost. Months passed, and Catherine continued to recover, both physically and emotionally. Although she was still shaken by what had happened, there was a renewed strength in her, as if the near-death experience had awakened something new. The time Lucy spent by her sister's side had become precious. They talked more, reminisced about their childhood, and opened up about the mistakes and regrets that had driven them apart. Slowly, the bond that had broken over time was being restored. That afternoon, Lucy and Catherine decided to do something that, for them, represented a new beginning. They were on their way to their parents' house for a family lunch, an event that hadn't happened in many years. It was the first time they would return together after everything that had happened. "Are you ready?" Lucy asked, as the two of them got out of the car in front of their parents' house. Catherine took a deep breath, looking at the house and feeling a mix of nostalgia and nervousness. She was still fragile, but having Lucy by her side was all she needed to move forward. "Yes," Catherine replied with a small smile. "It's time to start over." The two walked together toward the door. The sound of laughter and family conversations echoed from inside the house. It was a noise that once seemed distant to Lucy, something she felt she would never be part of again. But now, everything was different. When the door opened, they were greeted with warm smiles. The family had gathered to celebrate Catherine's recovery and the fact that, despite everything, she was alive. The hugs were long, the words of support and affection even more intense. Sitting at the table, Lucy watched Catherine laugh with the family, the sparkle in her eyes slowly returning, visible but still delicate. She was recovering, and Lucy knew that, with time, Catherine would find the peace she deserved. After lunch, the two sisters walked through the garden of their parents' house, reminiscing about childhood memories and opening up about the past few months. The connection between them was stronger than ever, and they both knew that, no matter how difficult the journey had been, there was still hope for a better future. "Thank you, Lucy," Catherine said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "For not giving up on me. For being by my side when I needed you most." Lucy smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. "I'll never leave you again, Kath." "I promise," Lucy replied, holding her sister's hand. The two continued walking through the garden, watching the clear sky and the flowers swaying gently in the breeze. The worst was behind them, and although the scars of Michael's betrayal ran deep, the strength of the love between the sisters was even greater. They now had a second chance, and they were determined to make the most of it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.